Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made for a Punched Out Thursday to Die For. To create this layout, I'm using an older My Creative Scrapbook Kit. I like to take all the papers and all the embellishments that are left over and put them aside, and then I'll sometimes bring them with me when I go to a weekend crop, which is where I am in this video. So the papers and embellishments that you'll see in this layout, they were made using the 49 and Market Art Options Avesta collection. And I really don't think I've ever seen a 49 and Market paper collection that I don't like. I think they're all super beautiful. I love the florals, and I'm going to create kind of a simple layout. I use a photo of both of my daughters, and I use a couple of punches and dies. Because I was at a weekend retreat, I didn't have my usual stash of punches and dies, but I did bring at least one of each along. So I was able to create a punched out border and then some die cuts using dies as well. So I start off with a floral pattern paper for the background. I mount 2 strips of that paper, one on either side of the page, on a piece of cardstock that I know I won't use, and then I use a green piece of pattern paper and I place that in the center of those 2 strips. I mat the green pattern paper on some white cardstock. I end up covering that up, however. I'm also going to use part of a cut file. I believe this was also a My Creative Scrapbook cut file because I put it in with the other papers. And then because the cut file doesn't go exactly from edge to edge, I add a small piece of paper on the top and on the bottom of the green strip. And I believe that that paper is packaging from the embellishments. Now I'm attaching that piece of the cut file down. I'm using some Aleene's gel glue to do that. Once I have the gel glue covering the entire back of that cut file, I lay it on top of the green paper, and then I make sure it's positioned correctly before I press it down. Although I didn't bring a huge selection of punches with me, I did have a Martha Stewart lace border punch, and I thought that that went along really well with this collection. So I punched some borders out of some white cardstock, and then I attach them on either side of that green center strip. And in case you're wondering, that green strip measures 5 inches across. This is the photo that I'm using of my daughters. This was taken in Cape Cod several years ago. There was a purple frame that was left from the original kit, so I layered that on top of the photo, and then I cut a piece of white cardstock to put behind it because I always like to reinforce things that I know I'm going to pop up on some foam and give some dimension to. I thought that this darker purple would pick up some of the darker purples in the pattern paper, so I cut 2 small strips from it. This is a layering piece also from the kit, and I placed a small strip of it on either side of the photo and attached it down. Now I'm adding some fun foam. I cut it to size and I remove the adhesive backing and I stick that right down to my photo. And then I use ATG adhesive and I'm going to attach the photo down right in the center of the layout. I found that I had a few really pretty flowers left over from the kit, and I was really happy to see that I had a rose type flower to go in the center and then 2 other somewhat similar flowers that are about the same size, one to go on either side of that rose. So I thought it made a nice flower cluster on top of the photo. I'm going to include a title that says Crazy Good Time. There was a sentiment strip that said Crazy Time, so I cut it in half and combined it with the word good. And I felt that that was an accurate title because we do always have a crazy good time when we go to Cape Cod. I picked out a sentiment that says today. I put that to the right of the photo. I don't end up including that in the final layout. I moved the title down to the bottom because there was a little bit more room there since I had the flower cluster on top of the photo. And I think that that gives it a little bit more room and makes it a little bit easier to read. And then I was thinking that I could put some sentiment strips on top of the flowers, and there were a whole bunch of sentiment strips, so I had a lot to choose from. I also picked out some stamps, and I'm going to place those on the lower left-hand side of the photo. And I use one of the packaging pieces to die cut out some little branches, and I tucked a few of those into the flower cluster. I found that I had a small purple bow, so I thought that I would add that little detail below the photo. I found that I had a very small strip of paper. I used an American Crafts scallop punch to punch that piece of paper out. I must have used the rest of it on another layout, but I thought that was perfect since it was a punched out Thursday to die for, since it's another punched out element. I spent some time matting some of those smaller sentiments so that they would stand out a little bit. I don't end up using the sentiments that are printed on white paper. I end up just using two sentiments. One is going to say happy day and the other one is going to say awesome. But at this point in the layout, I was thinking that having a lot of sentiments over that floral cluster might look nice. Now I'm adding some white cardstock to the back of the words crazy and time, because I'm going to also pop those up on a little bit of foam. Still playing around with those sentiments at the top of the page. I just couldn't figure out exactly what I wanted to do. So now I'm matting yet another one of the sentiments. I use some ATG adhesive to attach the sentiments down. Like I said, I'm going to switch things up in a little bit. Now I'm going to use some foam and pop up those words crazy and time, just using a few little scraps. I had forgotten to bring a stash of foam with me on this crop. I was driving to meet my friend. We were going to drive together, and I realized on the way to meet her that I had forgotten foam, but it was too late to go back and get any. But luckily, I did find a small amount of foam from last time. It was in one of my scrapbooking bags. It wasn't quite enough to last me through the weekend, but it definitely lasted for this particular layout. So you can see on top of the flower cluster, I have replaced all of those sentiments with two sentiments. One is blue and one is green, and then I found part of a butterfly, so I thought that in order to get some use out of it, I could tuck it behind the sentiment that says happy day. And although I switched sentiments, I still use that tiny little scalloped punched out strip, and I put it under the word awesome. I'm using some heavy matte gel medium to attach my flowers down to the layout. This is my favorite adhesive for dimensional flowers. I also attach down the leaves on either side using the gel medium. The green branches that I'm tucking into the cluster came from one of the Prima flower packs that we received in this kit. I cut them a little bit shorter so that they fit a little bit better in the cluster. I add back in the die cuts from earlier, and I use a little bit of gel glue to attach those down just because I had that handy. I didn't ink everything on this layout, but I did use a little bit of Distress Oxide in Mowed Lawn. I inked the edges of the flowers and the leaves that I'm placing on the layout right now. And I also inked the edges of the sentiments, happy day and awesome, that are at the top of the page. I play around with the cluster on the lower left-hand side of the photo. I have a flower, I have some leaves, and I'm also going to be incorporating some stamps into that cluster. This series, A Punched Out Thursday to Die For, is a collaboration. In the description box, you'll find links to the channels of Kathy, Sonia, and Ronnie Sue, and they have some great videos on their channels, including A Punched Out Thursday to Die For. So I hope that you will check all of those channels out. I have to say that I changed the tab on the right-hand side of the photo quite a few times. I end up switching it out again before the layout is done. And now I'm adding some pearls to those scalloped lace borders. I have lots and lots of pearls that are this slightly larger size. I always tend to use the smaller ones first, so I thought that this would be a good opportunity to use up some of the larger ones because I think that it's a good size for this particular border. In addition to the pearls that I put on the scalloped borders, and I also put one on the bow that's below the pictures, I also include some smaller pearls on the sentiments and on the stamps. Now I'm using some white gesso and a paintbrush, and I'm dabbing the gesso onto the flowers. This gives the flowers a little bit more of a dimensional look, and I just think that they look so pretty with highlights. I add the gesso mainly on the edges of each of the petals. I also want to add a little bit to some of the other embellishments just so that the flowers aren't the only thing that have white accents. So I dab a little bit of gesso on the purplish leaves that are in the cluster to the left of the photo, and then also the cluster that is below the photo. I often work on one cluster and then move on to the next cluster, but it seems on this layout I'm jumping from cluster to cluster. I brought in another stamp at this time. I layered the blue stamp on top of the green stamp. The blue stamp says good day and the green stamp says moments. I'm making sure that everything is attached down to my layout, so I use some gel glue and double check to make sure that everything was attached down. Now I go back to the gesso and I add some to the branches that are at the top, and then I add a tiny bit to some of the other embellishments on the page. Then to add a little bit more shine to the layout, I use some Master's Choice Opal Glitter Medium, and I brush that all over the flowers and also the leaves that are on the layout. And I have to apologize, my head is in this video a little bit more than I would like it to be. But you could see that I'm using my paintbrush and I'm brushing on the opal medium, and it adds a nice shiny effect to the leaves and the branches that I put it on. Now, I was feeling like I didn't use quite enough punches and dies on this layout, so I decided to see how it would look if I added a border to both sides of the layout, and I liked the way that looked, so I attached it down. Now I'm adding some pearls to the flowers. Once again, my head is in the video, so I cut a lot of this out, but I use glossy accents and some small pearls, and I place them on the flowers. I also put a couple on the sentiments at the top of the page, and then a few on those stamps. I believe that glossy accents is the perfect adhesive to attach these tiny pearls to pages. I find that when I use glossy accents, the embellishments will stay put because it's a very strong adhesive. Adding these very tiny pearls is the last touch that I add to the layout. This layout is complete, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I always love using my punches and dies to create a scrapbooking layout. Please don't forget to check out the channels of Ronnie Sue, Kathy, and Sonia. The links to their channels are in the description box. As I said, I think you'll really enjoy their channels. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.